hppodcraft.com. Not all of the few remaining inhabitants of Dahlbergen, that dismal little village in the Ramapo Mountains, believe that my uncle, old Dominique Vanderhoof, is really dead. Some of them believe he is suspended somewhere between heaven and hell because of the old sexton's curse. If it had not been for that old magician, he might still be preaching in the little damp church across the moor.
And I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for that old magician.
I don't think he's referring to, David Copperfield-esque, Doug Henning type magician.
Hey, what is Domini? Is that a name? Or
Domini? No. Domini is it's a Scottish English word for schoolmaster or minister, and it was used by the Church of Scotland.
Okay.
But it also got picked up by Presbyterian churches. Would also use them, and the Dutch Reformed Church. Yeah.
So it's a title.
It's a title. It means like a minister, basically.
And now, what about Chris Lackey? Is that a name?
Yeah, that's a name. That's my name, actually.
Oh, glad to meet you.
What's your name?
And my name is Chad Fife.
Oh, Chad. Wonderful to hear you again.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. We're here at the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At hppodcraft.com.
And that was our reader named Anthony Tedesco.
A guy that we use and abuse quite a bit here on the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, but he always does such a great job. We have to get him back. And the story is...
Two Black Bottles.
Two Black Bottles, which was co-written by a friend of Lovecraft's.
Wilfred Blanch Talman. Who is he, just briefly?
Briefly, he was a friend of Lovecraft's, and they only worked together once on this story, but they were friends before he moved to New York, while he lived in New York, and then up until Lovecraft died, they were good friends.
Okay.
We'll get into more detail about who he is and what he was about after we discuss the story.
Now, in that opening paragraph, they mentioned the Ramapo Mountains. That's a chain of mountains in the Appalachians in northeastern New Jersey.
Yep, and in New York. It also goes into New York.
In New York, yeah. And so the story takes place in the U.S., despite the reference to the damp church across the moor and
Dominique Vanderhoof.
Right.
Dominique.
Well, Vanderhoof, that's a Dutch name, right?
Yes, it is a Dutch name, and like I said, the Dominique was used by the Dutch Reformed Church, so it makes sense.
And this story is narrated by Dominique Vanderhoof's nephew.
Yeah, Hoffman, but they don't mention his name until later. In the story.
Oh, really?
Like a little paragraph in, when he's talking to the grocery store, Mark Haynes, the grocery, he says, you should be careful, Hoffman. That's what he says.
Oh, wow. See, because I was about to say that I'm so tired of saying, when we discuss these, unnamed characters in Lovecraft, I'm so tired of saying the protagonist or the narrator, the protagonist, the narrator. I was just going to go ahead and pick a name for him if they don't have one. And for this guy, I named him Gary Vanderhoof. So I just wanted to call him Gary, but if his name's Hoffman, oh well. I'm going to save Gary.
They don't say his first name, so it could be Gary Hoffman.
Oh yeah, this is Gary Hoffman. That's right, because his uncle's named Vanderhoof, and I believe it's his maternal uncle, so he probably wouldn't have the same name.
No, of course not.
So his name's Gary Hoffman.
Gary Hoffman.
So after that first paragraph that we just heard, Gary goes on to say,
After what has happened to me in Dahlbergen, I can almost share the opinion of the villagers. I am not sure that my uncle is dead, but I am very sure that he is not alive upon this earth. There is no doubt that the old sexton buried him once, but he is not in that grave now. I can almost feel him behind me as I write, impelling me to tell the truth about those strange happenings in Dahlbergen so many years ago.
Sounds like we might be getting a zombie story.
Well, here's the basic story. Gary was summoned to Dahlbergen by a member of his uncle's congregation, whom you've already mentioned, Mark Haynes, who told him, hey, your uncle's died, and he's got some inheritance here, an estate that you get. So come on out, and I've also got some strange, macabre things to discuss with you.
Strange, macabre things.
Well, something like that. And so Gary comes out, or Hoffman, it is his name. I see now in the reading. Hoffman comes out to meet this guy, Mark Haynes, and Mark says to him,
You should be careful, Hoffman, Haynes told me, when you meet that old sexton Abel Foster. He's in league with the devil, sure as you're alive. 'Twasn't 2 weeks ago, Sam Pryor, when he passed the old graveyard, heard him mumbling to the dead there. 'Twasn't right he should talk that way, and Sam does vow that there was a voice answered him, a kind of half-voice, hollow and muffled like, as though it had come out the ground. There's others, too, as could tell you about seeing him standing before old Dominie Slot's grave, that one right agin the church wall, a-wringing his hands and a-talking to the moss on the tombstone as though it was the old Dominie hisself.
Oh, so Sexton Foster is talking to tombstones, which is a little peculiar.
Well, that little paragraph in that first conversation that Mark Haynes has with him, he introduces a lot of character.
Yeah, well, first of all, a sexton is somebody at an office in church that maintains the churchyard, the buildings, the graveyard, and they also have the duty of ringing the church bells. So they're kind of like a church official, but they're not, clergy.
Right. Abel Foster is the sexton of this church. He also tells him about Dominie Slot, who we learn in a moment is the first reverend of the church from 1701.
A long time ago.
Slot is dead, and that's apparently who the sexton is talking to in the graveyard.
Well, he's talking to his tomb, or his tombstone, his grave. So,
he's mumbling to it.
Yeah, he's mumbling to him. And this Sam Pryor, who is never spoken of again, I believe, in the story, is the one that witnessed it. He's got some loose lips and likes to gossip, I guess.
And in the next little bit of story, we learned that Abel had come to Dahlbergen about 10 years before to take care of the church.
Yeah.
And nobody liked him except Vanderhoof. Immediately upon the sexton's arrival, bad things started to happen to the whole town. It's a mining town, but the mine gave out. There was no more iron. Yeah. So a ton of the families in town had to move away. Uh-huh. And the ones that stay, they just have to do this kind of farming and eke out a living on the land.
And things changed for Vanderhoof. He started acting differently, and people started noticing it and blaming Sexton Foster.
Right.
Then came the disturbances in the church. It was whispered about that the Reverend Johannes Vanderhoof had made a compact with the devil and was preaching his word in the house of God. His sermons had become weird and grotesque, redolent with sinister things which the ignorant people of Dahlbergen did not understand. He transported them back over ages of fear and superstition to regions of hideous, unseen spirits and peopled their fancy with night-haunting ghouls.
Yeah, I don't know. I was never a churchgoer, but if that had been going on in my town, I probably would have started actually showing up. That sounds awesome. Sounds like he's just reading Lovecraft stories. Sinners in the hands of an Eric Zahn.
There's not enough demons, at least at the church that I went to growing up. There wasn't enough hideous unseen spirits and night-haunting ghouls. Always wanted more of that stuff.
I know, that was my big Can you please transport me back over some ages of fear? Stop talking about, being kind to each other.
Yeah, I need some more. I need to be terrified when I go to sleep at night.
Well, people were terrified of Dominie Vanderhoof because of the crap that he was talking about, but also because, he's a giant in stature. They say it's pretty well known that he's weak of heart, but he's a big guy.
Right. He's a timid. He was a timid man, and all of a sudden, when he starts hanging out with this Sexton Foster, he's getting a little strange, a little peculiar.
And the villagers are saying, "Hey, could you cut it out?" But he just ignores them.
Yep.
Keeps doing these kind of sermons, and the town is too poor to send for somebody else. So everybody just stops going to church.
Yeah, they just stop going. One of the creepier things is people stop going to the church entirely, and yet they can still hear him on Sunday mornings doing the sermon.
Yeah, it's great.
Nobody's around.
Whether he knows that people are there or aren't there, it's hard to say.
Hard to say.
He's just,
don't know.
Yeah. So Vanderhoof's up there preaching to nobody, and Sexton Foster is living in the basement of the church, kind of taking care of him and still taking care of the grounds, even though nobody's there to appreciate it. And every week, Abel Foster will come into the town for provisions, and he's all old and evil and says weird things to people, and they don't
Give him the creepy eye.
So Hoffman's talking to Mark Haynes, and Mark says, well, one day somebody saw Foster digging a grave.
Yeah.
And then the sexton came into town earlier that week than he normally does, and he was all happy and sunshiny, and it was because Vanderhoof had died.
Yeah.
And this made Foster very happy. And he says to everybody, "Hey, I buried him next to old Dominie Slot out in the churchyard. Yay!" It's like his parents have gone out of town or something. I can have all the ice cream for me now,
Yeah, he seems pretty excited, and they say he took a perverse and diabolic delight in it.
Yeah,
which they seem to be pretty good friends. But that's enough for Hoffman, for our protagonist. He kind of hears them. He's like, "Well, I'm gonna go talk to this sexton guy and get the straight scoop."
It was one of my favorite parts is because it was after the sexton was home alone that Mark Haynes called Hoffman up and told him to come down, and Hoffman didn't really know his uncle. And one of my favorite lines in the story is,
"I assured my summoner, however, that I knew nothing about my uncle or his past, except that my mother had mentioned him as a man of gigantic physique, but with little courage or power of will.
Did she say that over breakfast or something? Who is that in the photo, Mama? Oh, that's just my brother I've never spoken of. He's freakishly large and total pussy. Let's get you to school now and never speak of this again. But as you say, Hoffman's not a wimp. He's a brave guy.
No, he's going, I'm going to go up there and check it out. And then Haynes says, no, don't go up there. Not at night. It's almost night. You shouldn't go. It's dangerous. It's not. And he's like, whatever. I'm going. See ya.
So Mark gives him directions to go out to the churchyard, and he sends him off saying,
"Take care that old devil Foster don't get you."
There's lots of good phonetic writing in here and good dialect stuff. So Hoffman travels through the spooky countryside, past the miasmal vapors of the swamp, and the moor, and he gets out to the church just as a big fat sun is setting over it. Of course, being a brave man, he still gets a little creeped out by the place. As he gets closer, he sees this brand new white cross out in the churchyard.
Yeah.
The discovery sent a new chill through me. I realized that this must be my uncle's grave, but something told me that it was not like the other graves near it. It did not seem like a dead grave. In some intangible way, it appeared to be living, if a grave can be said to live. Very close to it, I saw as I came nearer was another grave. An old mound with a crumbling stone about it. Dominie Slot's tomb, I thought, remembering Haynes' story.
Yeah. I thought that was a neat piece of writing.
Yeah, definitely. It's really setting you up for something, obviously, and it gives something character that that you wouldn't normally have. A grave. I would never have considered a grave being alive, being a living thing. In fact, it's kind of the antithesis of something that's alive.
Yeah, it gets dark really fast, and Hoffman can barely see his hands in front of his face, but he sees that there's some lights in the basement window of the church, and remembering that that's where Foster lives, he assumes he's down there. So he finds a side door to the church. He slides in. When he first comes into the church, he hears this singing that kind of stops and starts abruptly, like a sort of like a drunken singing coming from somewhere. He feels his way along the pews, and he gets to the basement door, and he knocks.
But nobody answers.
But nobody answers.
Silence.
So he does something kind of interesting. He removes the pins from the hinges and pulls the door down and goes in.
I've had to do that before.
It's pretty cool. Of course, it reeks like whiskey in this basement room.
Man, he's got to be drinking a lot of whiskey for a whole place to smell like whiskey.
Gary, I keep wanting to call him Gary. Hoffman says, hello, and he hears a little somewhere in the room. So,
but when he looks around, I mean, it's crazy in there.
Yeah.
My first glance into that unhallowed place was indeed startling. Strewn about the little room were old and dusty books and manuscripts, strange things that bespoke almost unbelievable age. On rows of shelves which reached to the ceiling were horrible things in glass jars and bottles, snakes and lizards and bats. Dust and mold and cobwebs encrusted everything in the center. Behind a table upon which was a lighted candle, a nearly empty bottle of whiskey and a glass, was a motionless figure with a thin, scrawny, wrinkled face and wild eyes that stared blankly through me. I recognized Abel Foster, the old sexton, in an instant. He did not move or speak as I came slowly and fearfully toward him.
This is a very Lovecraftian, room with old books and manuscripts and weird jars and creatures and cobwebs and, he's really setting the mood up here.
And so Gary goes over and he touches Abel's shoulder, which freaks him out. I think Abel kind of goes, nah!
He freaks out.
Wheels around,
swinging his arms. He just like he's being attacked.
He says he could tell that he was both drunk and struck with some kind of a nameless terror. So, I've been in that situation a few times.
That's a good line. Oh, that guy. Oh yeah, he's been struck by nameless terror.
Yeah. He had a little too much to drink. Too much nameless terror.
Too much nameless terror.
This is what Abel says after he recovers himself for a moment.
I thought ye was him, he mumbled. I thought ye was him come back for it. He's been a-trying to get out since I put him there. His voice again rose to a scream, and he clutched his chair. Maybe he's got out now. Maybe he's out.
He's out?
Somebody's out. Hoffman asks him what he's talking about, and Abel says that the cross on Vanderhoof's grave keeps falling down at night.
Yeah, just a little bit. It just keeps moving. It's kind of tilting a little further and a little further down.
Yeah, and the earth is kind of loose, so he has to repack it every day. It's not good.
So it sounds like we got a zombie story going on here. It sounds like he's trying to come back from the grave, but why? Why is Dominique Vanderhoof coming back?
I don't know. Well, Hoffman obviously wants to know this too. At first, he's a little skeptical, of course, but he looks out the window and he does see that even in that moment, the cross has moved. It's fallen a bit from the position it was when he first approached the church. And the sexton seems sort of resigned at this point and decides, hey, check it out, I'm going to tell you the truth. Yeah. All of these bats and lizards and old books and everything, they belong to Dominique Slot.
Yeah, he was the first Dominique of the church way back in 1701.
He brought this stuff over from the old country, and he was using it to practice black magic.
Black magic.
And here Sexton makes a little slip. He says, nobody knew that he was practicing the black magic. It was just Dominique Slot and me. And Hoffman...
Yeah, he goes, you? And he says, well, after I learned it, it was me. Like he picked up his books, and, he found the books when he first got the job at the church, and then he...
Right. Yeah, not that I was there or anything.
Yeah. No, he wasn't there because I wasn't there. No. When I got the job 10 years ago, I found all these books and things, and I started reading it. So now I know about this black magic stuff.
Yeah, that's a ticket. It's funny. He even says that he's like, I learned all this stuff when I wasn't at work. It's like this is his little after-work project. I got nothing better to do but drink and read some old spells.
He used to build ships in bottles, but now it's
right.
Now it's black magic.
And using the things that he learned, he found that he could use incantations to cast spells over people. And he used these occult rites to call down misery on the town. I don't really know what his motivation was.
Yeah, I don't know why he was so hell-bent on the townspeople. I don't know what they did to him, and it's never explained what they did to him to make him so angry.
He's just a jerk, and he brought Vanderhoof under his control, gradually using these incantations. There's a creepy image there. He would stare at Vanderhoof while he gave his sermons through the eyes of the devil in a painting of the temptation of Christ.
Yeah, crazy.
So while he's up there talking through his sermon, there's just these devil's eyes looking at him through a painting.
Yeah, a painting. Ugh.
So Hoffman says, you had him under your control. What did you do with him?
I took his soul! He howled in a tone that set me trembling. I took his soul and I put it in a bottle, in a little black bottle, and I buried him. But he ain't got his soul, and he can't go neither heaven nor hell. But he's a-coming back for it. He's a-trying to get out his grave now. I can hear him pushing his way up through the ground. He's that strong.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is a great moment because for Hoffman, everything he's saying suddenly makes sense. And he enters that moment of the horror protagonist who suddenly goes from reacting to scary things to trying to solve, what's going on. And he says, well, can't we dig up Vanderhoof and restore his soul? I like how he was skeptical a minute ago, and now he's yeah, well, the old coot's been drinking too much because he says, we can't do that. I forgot the formula. Which is funny. And that thing's going to get out of there, and we'll both be killed, me and you, because you came out here.
He's like, well, screw you. Where's the bottle? Give me the bottle. And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. You're not getting that bottle from me, pal.
And he stumbles against the wall to reveal that there's just 2 black bottles on a stool behind him. I'll never tell you where they are. I'll show you by moving out of the way.
Oh golly! And so, basically, Hoffman sees it, and the sexton sees that he sees it, and then they both kind of go for him, and then one of the bottles gets knocked off.
Yeah, Hoffman gets a little violent. It says he grabs the sexton by the throat. He grabs that old man by the throat.
Oh yeah.
And in the scuffle, one of the bottles tips over and it falls to the ground and it shatters.
There was a flash of blue flame, and a sulphurous smell filled the room. From the little heap of broken glass, a white vapor rose and followed the draft out the window. "Curse ye, ye rascals!" sounded a voice that seemed faint and far away. Foster, whom I had released when the bottle broke, was crouching against the wall, looking smaller and more shriveled than before. His face was slowly turning greenish black. "Curse ye!" said the voice again, hardly sounding as though it came from his lips. "I'm done for. That one in there was mine. Dominique Slot took it out 200 years ago."
Oh no!
Oh no, I didn't see that coming. Oh wait, yes I did.
So Sexton Abel Foster begins to decay right in front of him.
Rots right in front of him as his soul escapes. Yeah. So obviously he was a zombie, or he was an undead.
It turns out he had been immortal.
But my favorite part of that is curse ye, you rascal. Couldn't he found a much harsher word? Like the guy's just destroyed his life.
I know. That's something you say to a kid who's set off fireworks on your porch, not somebody who's just ended your 200-year immortal existence.
Exactly.
Well, Gary grabs the other bottle, which is starting to get a little warm, and outside he hears sliding earth, and when he looks out, he sees that the cross on Vanderhoof's grave is completely fallen.
Yep.
Bad stuff. So he finally just puts the bottle down and he says, "F this," and he just gets the hell out of there. And as he's running, or whatever he's doing to get out of there, he sees a gigantic, loathsome black shadow against the church in the moonlight. Yeah. So the next morning, Hoffman tells a bunch of villagers about what happened to him, but none of them want to go back with him.
Yeah. He said, I want to go check out and see what happened. Why go back? We don't need to go back.
Yeah.
What's there to see?
But there is an old bearded man who's brave enough to say, hey, I'll go along with you. Let's go check it out. So they go back to the scene of the crime. They get there. There's no bottle anymore.
No, bottle's gone.
Just the shattered remains of the other bottle and a heap of dust and clothing. And on the heap are some immense footprints. The grave outside is, of course,
empty.
No body in there. So the old man and Hoffman, they go, let's burn everything in here. They get all the books and the papers, and they torch it all. And they even throw the cross on the fire as an afterthought, which I thought was kind of a funny thing to do. The story ends with,
old wives say that now, when the moon is full, there walks about the churchyard a gigantic and bewildered figure clutching a bottle and seeking some unremembered goal.
And that's the end.
That's the end of the story.
That's a little sad, too.
Yeah.
Poor Dominique Vanderhoof. He just kind of got hosed all of his life, and now he's hosed in the afterlife. He's was walking around just trying to remember what he was supposed to do, and he just needs to break that bottle, get his soul out.
Yeah, I have questions. I'm a little confused about this story.
Yeah.
So why did the first Domini, why did Slot make Abel? Why did he take his soul?
Well, I think he was going to make him a minion,
like a servant.
That's just what I took out of it. He's going to make him a servant, and then that's what the Sexton was trying to do.
Okay.
Was he wanted to take Vanderhoof and make him into his minion?
Right.
But obviously that didn't work out.
So this is sort of like the statement of Randolph Carter, where there's this sorcerer who goes into the ground, but he's still alive down there, kind of communicate, because Abel keeps talking to the grave, so I guess he is communicating with the original Domini.
Right.
Okay, so he's sort of his servant on Earth, and then he tries to make his own servant.
I'm guessing. Yeah.
I don't know. But then why did he try to bury him?
Yeah, I don't know.
His soul?
Maybe that was part of the magic, is you had to bury the body, and then he would come up, and then you could control him. But he didn't seem to be too in control, and he was just really drunk. So he seems to be a really bad sorcerer.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I liked part of the story, but mostly I found it a little lame.
I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I thought there's some really good passages in there, and I like the mood of it, and I like the story. But you're right, it does have a few holes in it. It's not one of my favorites, and it's not really one of Lovecraft's either. This is Wilfred Blanch Talman's story, and
right.
Yeah, Lovecraft kind of did a rewrite on it.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote it between June and October of 1929. Talman and Lovecraft became friends back when Lovecraft still lived in Providence before he moved to New York. He had a book of poetry that he wanted to get published, and for some reason he sent it to Lovecraft, I guess because he was in all the amateur journals and things, and he was sort of a name in those circles.
Right.
So he sent him to that, and Lovecraft liked his poems, and then they just kind of talked and became friends. This is the first and only project that they worked together on, and I guess Talman was a little disappointed in how it turned out. I have an exact quote here for you.
Uh-huh.
This is in Talman's 1973 memoir that he wrote, and this is about his revisions. He did some minor gratuitous editing, particularly of the dialogue. After reading it in print, I wish Lovecraft hadn't changed the dialogue, for his use of the dialect was stilted. So...
those are my favorite parts of the story.
Yeah, I kind of like that stuff too. So,
So really, this is Talman's story.
It's his story, and I guess Lovecraft made some pretty serious changes. I think it was it wasn't in first person originally, and Lovecraft made it into first person. This is one of the things in doing research about this story. I found out about Talman was in this thing called the Talman Club that Lovecraft was a part of. Do you know about this?
Right. I've heard about it, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah, basically,
what it is.
When Lovecraft lived in New York, he got together with a group of writers, and they were friends. I mean, it wasn't really a literary group; it was just a group of dudes that would get together and hang out. But it included Reinhard Kleiner, Everett McNeil, and James Morton. And then when Lovecraft joined, he got some of his buddies in on the group: Frank Long, George Kirk, and Arthur Leeds. They would just get together on Thursdays usually, but then Lovecraft was bragging about, because he was kind of the guy that sort of kept this thing going, because when he moved to Providence, it sort of fell apart.
Right.
But while he was there, Lovecraft bragged about how he found this aluminum pail for 49 cents, and he would run to the local delicatessen and get it filled with coffee, and then bring it back to his place, and then pour it into like a coffee pot, like a little teapot and stuff like that. Because he was super poor at this time. He didn't have any money, so he'd found the cheapest ways, but made it look like it was like really nice coffee and put it in his finest china and stuff. Talman worked for a newspaper and different publishing things, and he tried to get Lovecraft work a bunch of times, and Lovecraft just was like, I don't want to be a reporter. And because Lovecraft, traveled occasionally, would write these, really interesting things about, his travels. And Talman was trying to he goes, hey, maybe you should, do some, I know this guy, we can get you to do some travel editing and some travel writing and stuff. I think that'd be really cool. And Lovecraft's, well, I don't travel as much as I used to. And totally, blows him off. And then they were going to do a book together. And Talman was doing all the heavy lifting. He went to the publishing company, it was Morrow and Company, and was like, hey, I got this novel by H.P. Lovecraft, it'd be really cool. And then Lovecraft died before that ever happened.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
I don't think Lovecraft would have been a great journalist. Even travel writing, which is a little more descriptive, is still journalism. I mean, you have to kind of keep it down to the who, what, and where, and that's not exactly his forte. So, this story, Two Black Bottles, it got published in Weird Tales?
Yeah, Weird Tales. It got published in 1927 of August. So, it saw the light of day in Lovecraft's time. So, and I probably got a little dough for it. Got a little money.
Kind of unrelated thing. Well, it's somewhat related in that it involves zombies. I went to go see, Stuart Gordon is trying to get a theatrical production of Reanimator going. It's a musical version of it.
Yeah.
It's just called Reanimator the Musical. And they did a couple of staged readings / singings here in Hollywood, and I got the chance to go to one, and it was really good. It really adapted itself. Yeah, it was really good. The music was great. The songs were fun. He got together a great little cast to do it. I have to say it was somewhat surreal because the bad guy from Ghostbusters, William Atherton, if you know that actor, William Atherton, he was the journalist in Die Hard he was
the bad guy in Real Genius.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was so good at playing those 80s bad guys, and he's still been. You see him all the time in movies and TV. He was in the reading. He was doing the bad guy from the movie, the one that looks like John Kerry. I think it's Hill. And then George Wendt was playing Dr. Halsey.
Yeah.
And Meshack Taylor was in there as well, who was I just know him as the black guy from Designing Women, but. He was and he was Hollywood in Mannequin as well. And obviously George Wendt is Norm. And there was a great duet where it was William Atherton and George Wendt singing about Miskatonic, and it was like these two 80s icons singing about Lovecraft. It was a very surreal experience for me.
It was a dream come true.
It was. He's looking to get some backers for that so that they can mount it over at the Center for Inquiry in Hollywood.
Right. Yeah.
And hopefully they'll get it on stage soon, because it was a real blast. I was amazed at how well it adapted itself to that kind of format. It was very funny.
Oh God! So one of the drawbacks to moving away to England is missing out on the cool Hollywood stuff.
Yeah. Although we were off for 2 weeks, and you did a little traveling.
Yeah.
I actually just took some time off because my wife was leaving to go. She's doing a Second City show on a cruise ship, and I want to spend more time with her. But it was funny when she was leaving. I was like, well, make sure you download and listen to the podcast while you're on the ship, so you can hear my voice. And she says, are you crazy? I'm not going to listen to your show while I'm out on the ocean.
That's probably for the best, actually.
But you were doing some traveling around England, and didn't you?
Yeah, I was down to London a bit, and then we went up to Stratford, and I saw a production of Morte d'Arthur, which was what the Royal Shakespeare Company did. That was really flipping cool. I guess it's one of the benefits of living in England, is you get to see that kind of stuff.
Didn't you were telling me that you went to see this terrible Dracula? Well, I shouldn't say it was terrible. You went to go see the Dracula Experience or something.
Right, I went to Whitby, which is where in the story Dracula. That's where he lands. After when he comes from Transylvania, he comes to England. Yeah. Whitby is where he lands, and I believe that's where there's a big abbey, an old abbey, ruined abbey up there, and that's where he fights at the end. Right? That's when.
Where they chase him to, where he's got
where they chase him to at the end.
Hidden. Yeah.
So it's got a lot of history there, but there's this little this thing called the Dracula Experience, and it looks like the 1990s Dracula, when the movie came out.
Right, the Coppola movie.
Yeah, the Coppola movie, and it was really bad. It was sort of like I felt like I was at Wisconsin Dells.
Really?
Yeah.
Wisconsin Dells was. I used to go there to vacation when I was a kid, and it was kind of cheeseball little wax museums and horror shows and that kind of thing. So it's that kind of thing, huh? It
was really terrible. Yeah. Except I really enjoyed it. So
yeah,
it was £2.50. So if you've got £2.50 to spare and you want to see a really bad exhibit that is somewhat entertaining, check that out at Whitby.
Sometimes I like that more. I went to a wax museum in St. Louis. It was the worst wax museum I've ever been in my life, and I had so much fun there. Just the disrepair that they tried to in the House of Horrors in there, they put some mannequins in there trying to trick me. Those aren't wax figures. Those are mannequins. Those are store mannequins. You can't just draw a mustache on that and call it John Wilkes Booth. You can't do that. The way that the sexton dissolved into nothing reminded me a little bit of Dracula, which reminded me of your trip to Whitby. So.
Oh, right, yeah. Next week.
Yeah, next week's a big one.
Next week we have Pickman's Model.
That's right. And may have some guests on that show. I'm not sure yet, but it'll be a fun one, definitely.
And I want to thank Anthony Tedesco again for reading for us this week.
Good guy, great reading, good stuff all around.
And with that, I'm Chris Lackey.
I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
And this has been the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At hppodcraft.com.
Pushing his way up through the ground. He's that strong! I got lightheaded.
Did you really?
I did.
That was great.
I need a second.
Yeah.
hppodcraft.com